All right, let's go ahead and get started, everyone. I think it's a good enough time here for us to go ahead and hop in. Thank you everyone again for joining. This year's Yosef Malaku, and we'll get into introductions in just a bit here, but wanted to just take a moment here to again thank you all for joining. We're really looking forward here this morning to sharing more about our webinar, Work Less, Do More, diving into Microsoft Power Apps and Flow. Ratna, do you mind going ahead and hopping into our slides here?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, cool. And just before you go ahead and get started there, just want to say we are recording this session. So if you have to step out at all, we will be providing this afterwards as well as uploading it to YouTube. So you can share with any friends who might not have been able to make it as well. And secondly, and most importantly, we definitely want this to be interactive. While we did get and appreciate your pre-session questions, feel free to, call out any questions you might have as you gather more information from the slides, but we will also have a Q&A session at the end to have a sort of more, town hall style discussion on those questions. However, if you don't feel quite so comfortable, raising your hand, quote unquote, on this call, feel free to go ahead and drop a question in the chat box, and we can go ahead and pass that on to Ratna to get addressed in real time or at the end, depending on where that question comes in. So with that, Ratna, go ahead and kick us off.
Sure. Thanks, Yosef. My name is Ratna Jijjavarapu. And we're going to talk today about working less and doing more using Power Apps and Flow. And Yosef has already given you a little bit of an introduction about the seminar, but Yosef, do you want to also talk about the company?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you want to know, who's providing this information. So just real quickly, we are with Cyclotron. Cyclotron is a San Francisco-based Microsoft managed partner. And as part of that partnership, we serve both the Office 365 and Azure environments as part of that ecosystem. With that, we have a lot of sort of key practices, as you can see there, looking at modern workplace and sort of general collaboration, understanding how you weave in security and controls around that, especially with highly regulated industries and looking at compliance needs, whether SOX or any of the others. And really sort of looking to work with companies with a very programmatic view, kind of going to that framework there that you can see. So working with you to align business and IT in a way that really makes sense, both from the end user perspective as well as the business and IT, and making sure that there's harmony across those three parties. And as part of that, we do cover, we do provide coverage across the United States, with the bulk of our team being based on the West Coast here. And so as part of that, obviously, we have gained a lot of expertise in training, adoption, and implementing solutions such as Power Apps and Flow. And so really looking to use our time here today to sort of show some of that expertise to you and hopefully have you walking away feeling a little bit more enlightened as to what these powerful tools can do for you and the rest of your organization.
Thanks again, Yosef. So just again, just to give a quick introduction about myself, I am a SharePoint architect, primarily and also work with other Office 365 service offerings, especially Teams, and Power Apps and Flow most recently. And we've been working with a lot of customers, for their modernization requirements using Power Apps and Flow. As part of that, today we're going to cover, these agenda items. First, we'll kind of introduce what Power Platform is, and then we'll move on to the overview of Power Apps, what it is and how it works, and what are the Power Apps and Flow features available in SharePoint Online. And then we'll talk about types of apps, then Power Apps Studio, and then overview of Flow, what it is, types of Flow, the Flow Designer, and the pre-canned templates that come with Flow. And we'll jump onto the Crisis app demo real quick, and we'll kind of cover at a high level the best practices and governance guidelines. But I do also have a link to the detailed slide deck and presentation from last year's Ignite session. And then we'll also talk about licensing options. So Microsoft has created this umbrella service offering called Power Platform, which includes Power Apps, Flow, and Power BI. And all these three services use, pretty much the same API in the backend to allow users and businesses to create simple to complex applications using Power Apps, and also backend, logic using Business Flow and Power Apps, Power BI reports and analytics. So what is Power Apps, right? So businesses, Power Apps really allows businesses to create and use custom business apps across platforms. Really what that means is it allows them to connect to multiple data sources through connectors and or even through custom connectors connecting to their on-prem databases and data sources. And then it also allows them to create, UI front end using Power Apps Studio and connecting to the backend. And then they allow them to publish those apps to their user base based on, either security groups or, per team or to the entire organization. And again, as a continuation to that, at a high level, business apps, the Power Apps usually generally allows building apps easily using the full featured and low code, no code platform, which is again the Power App Studio, and that's the development interface. It also lets users and apps connect to about 230 plus, or actually it's actually more. They've added more connectors now to Microsoft services in cloud, on-prem, and also to third-party services as well.
Hey, Ratna, do you mind maybe just kind of going over a few of the big name connectors and plugins that a lot of industries tend to use or sort of want to connect to?
Yeah,
Just off the top.
we have a slide coming up
Okay.
with there's a few, yeah. And yeah, we have a slide next to this one. And Power Apps can also connect to a common data service for apps. This is basically a cloud database that Microsoft manages and to develop complex applications for specific business scenarios. And it also allows for streamlined Office 365, Azure Dynamics 365, and Power BI integration, along with strong enterprise governance security. And some of it, some of the governance and security features are integrated into Power Apps and Admin Center, and some of them are available through API. Lastly, it also provides professional developers to extend the functionality using custom connectors and other customizations. So yes, Yusuf was mentioned earlier. These are really Microsoft has partnered with a lot of third-party companies to connect to their services through these connectors. So it's easier for businesses and users to create flows and Power Apps, connecting directly to these third-party services, and seamlessly to essentially the behind the scenes connectivity is hidden from the user, and it's quite easy for them to connect to third-party services again, like Box, Dropbox, Twitter, and other services. So how it all works is essentially users or developers or power users, they start by building these apps using Power App Studio, which is an in-browser visual designer and development interface, you can call it. And it will let users connect to on-prem or cloud data sources using connectors. And the Power Apps Cloud lets them publish these apps once they're ready, to their organization, to the entire organization, or to specific user groups. By default, Power Apps applications are mobile ready, meaning they're responsive, to the most extent, unless you have a lot of customization. Then users can actually develop their own responsive design if they wanted to customize the behavior. on different devices. The PowerApps and Flow features, again, this particular slide combines PowerApps and Flow together. And all it says is, the features that are available in SharePoint Online are primarily support for images, attachments, and multi-value fields when you're connecting to a custom list in SharePoint. And Flow integration with document libraries, lists, and OneDrive for Business, and the ability to kick off flows for selected items in a SharePoint list. Additionally, you can embed PowerApps in SharePoint Online Modern pages using the PowerApps Modern Web Part. Excuse me. And you can customize the out-of-the-box SharePoint custom list forms right from the browser.
And hey, Ratna, could you just maybe quickly go over the differences between the modern Office 365 that you were mentioning and the previous version for any folks who might not have heard about that recent switch?
Sure. Yeah. So Microsoft has recently, well, about a few years ago, they've developed this modern interface for SharePoint, and which is available in SharePoint Online and in on-prem 2019 version as well. What it is basically a better UI, which has a seamless interface, and compared to the classic mode. However, obviously, because of the modern UI, they're still working on the modern UI capabilities. So there are certain limitations to the number of web parts that you can add, but to the most part, it's pretty comprehensive. They've been able to map pretty much most of the web parts that are available in Classic. So, and only the modern view allows you to kind of embed Power Apps. I'm sorry, not Power Apps web part, but customizing through Power Apps, the out-of-box forms. So types of apps. So we have two types of apps: canvas-based apps and model-driven apps. Again, this particular slide is pretty verbose, but the gist of it is the canvas-based apps allow you to connect to all the different connectors that you have, and they let you start from scratch, pretty much from blank canvas, right? And they are for mobile-first application users, you can provide user-friendly application UI for them. And in some cases, again, you may have to add custom responsive logic in there, but to the most part, all the controls and UI are responsive. Model-driven apps, they are primarily based, they let you create common data service database. Again, this is the cloud data store managed by Microsoft, and it comes with, by default, it comes with certain default entities, tables, relationships, but you can create your own data model specific to your business case and work with it. It also lets you create business, business process workflows, which are complex workflows based on, again, that data model. And it also lets you group different business functionality into one app, so you don't have to manage the relationships and everything manually or through you would do in Canvas apps. And PowerApps Plan 2, though, license is actually required for model-driven apps, so that's one of the caveats. So that's something to keep in mind, and we can talk about the licensing options in detail. Coming to PowerApp Studio, so the interface really looks like a screenshot here, and you can get the PowerApp Studio an in-browser experience interface, as well as a PowerApps Studio for desktop, which is available for Windows 10 in the Microsoft Store. And as you can see, it allows users or power users to connect to different data sources. It shows you, it gives you a preview of all the controls screens that are available in this app, and you can start adding new screens and controls. And the gallery control specifically is pretty useful for listing data and allowing users to edit and save information. Buttons and navigation, again, they allow you to implement proper user experience using interactive code. And the code really, again, this is probably for IT developers and power users who are probably familiar with Excel macro coding. The formula bar in Power Apps is pretty similar to the formula bar in Excel. And in addition to being quite similar to that, the formula bar in Power App Studio allows you to create complex code right in the browser, and you could use the format text option to format the code for easy readability. Coming to the actions, actions really are specific to controls. Each control has specific actions. Again, the list of actions may differ from control to control, but primarily they allow you to define how users can navigate, submit forms, create new forms, edit forms, and also refresh backend data sources, and do bulk updates using update or patch functions, and also to be able to kick off a flow from the code itself. Now, these are really the common business scenarios that businesses can use for developing for Power Apps-based apps. The legal approvals, reporting, expense approvals, procurement automation, new employment onboarding, training, video portals, right, change management, PTO request approval. So I specifically mentioned the PTO request approval because Microsoft has a template app called Leave Request, and you'll find it in the app gallery from the template gallery for Power Apps.
Yeah, and just curious to the audience, real quick, any particular business scenarios that might be on your mind at your organization that you want to sort of verify real quickly with us? Feel free to go ahead and throw those out, whether now or in the chat box, like I had mentioned earlier.
Yes, definitely. I think that will definitely help to explain better the capabilities of Power Apps.
Any questions? Going once, going twice? All right, let's go ahead and continue on, Ratna.
Sure. And we'll wrap up discussion about Flow, and then we can jump into the demo. So coming to the Flow, Flow is really an enterprise software service for business users to automate processes across applications and services. Again, what that means is they can develop workflows to get notifications when file is being added or updated, or when to synchronize files, to organize data, and also to automate approvals. Again, these are pretty simple scenarios, but Flow can be also used for creating complex business workflows. Types of flows. So we have about 4 types of flows. Scheduled flows allow you to schedule the runs based on a specific schedule. Instant flows, you can kick off a flow manually as well. And automated flows, these are the ones that are triggered based on a trigger that's connected to a connector. So for example, when a list item is created in a SharePoint list, or a data record is added in a database, things like that. And also business process flows. These are specific, again, to model-driven apps, and they will require Power Apps Plan 2 license, and they will allow you to create complex multi-stage flows based on your business scenarios. The Flow Designer, again, this is an in-browser designer that lets you create flows using connectors, triggers, and actions, right? So every flow starts with a trigger, and the trigger has to be specific to a connector. So for example, in this slide, we're showing use of the trigger for when a file is created in a Dropbox folder, and again, this trigger is specific to Dropbox connector, and the list of triggers and actions obviously differ from connector to connector, and some of the connectors may be limited in the number of triggers and actions that are available. Some of them may be pretty comprehensive. And then the after the trigger follows the action. Action is what you take after that trigger occurs and the flow is kicked off. Again, this simple scenario, we're just sending an email to specific recipients with metadata that you get that you can read from the trigger itself. And the metadata could be anything from simple file path, file size, or from to the entire file content. You can attach and that information to the email and send that out to specific users or a group of users. Again, as we talked about, so Visual Designer has actions, and actions are what lets you kind of define what would happen after a specific trigger has occurred, which really kicks off the workflow or flow. And connectors, again, we talked about for each connector, there are multiple actions, and you can create your own custom connectors if the out-of-the-box connectors are not not what you're looking for, or specific for a specific scenario you couldn't find the connector out of the box. And there are you can connect to custom you can create custom connectors, or you can use the HTTP endpoint connector to kick off a REST-based service, and which is probably defined on your on-premise or online. And flow, when users and power users try to create a new flow, they get an option to create from multiple templates. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of templates available for specific for most common scenarios. But again, these are templates only give you the outline or the skeleton, so to speak, of the flow. But you'll have to go in and start filling in the details as to the actual connections or the URLs to a SharePoint list, things like that. So it's really an easy way to get started, if you're, kind of new to Flow and want to give it a try, or if you're not sure how to start from blank. So before we jump on to the demo, any questions so far?
Yes, please throw those out if you guys have any. This is now the time, in addition to the Q&A.
All right. Again, you can definitely type in the questions in the chat window. But moving on, we can move to the Crisis app demo. So Microsoft has created this app for letting management to check on their team, or and the entire company, their employees, basically, to make sure they're safe, and to get their status right when a natural disaster has occurred, or when a crisis is in progress. So again, this app really has two components: the management component and the response component. So the management app is basically what lets the managers, or even the CEO, to essentially kind of alert their employees about a crisis. For example, you can say fire, please your status or safety, right? And when you click notify, this will essentially send out a push notification to all the employees who on their mobile phones. And I cannot demo that to you right now, but once the users and employees they get a notification, they can go in and open their response app. Again, this can be done from the mobile device, but for the purpose of the demo, I'm just opening this in the browser, and they can simply say they're safe or not. Well, before that, just want to kind of note that once the notification is sent out, it's not only sent out to the employees, but also to the actual team, so team channel. So in this case, it's kind of connected to the Microsoft Teams channel, and as you can see, the recent notification or has been sent as a crisis notification, and the subsequent responses will be recorded here as well. And as you can see, I'm going to create, I'm going to say I'm safe, and this will send out an email to the manager, and also to also record that in the Microsoft Teams channel as well, as you can see. And again, depending on how many employees are there, we'll get all the notifications. And these responses are also kind of recorded in a SharePoint list that you could use to create powerful reports using Power BI to understand the effect or impact of a crisis on your company employees. Again, it's based on location, so it's all marked over there. In addition to that,
and just real quick, Ratna, sorry to interrupt there. Just one thing to add to that form: when you're on the receiving end as an end user, depending on your specific needs as an organization, you could add more fields to that push notification. So if you want to include an open text field, so responders can include more details. Hey, yeah, fire is about 50 feet from the building. And then provide some specifics. That is possible. If you need to include photos as well, you could include that, so users could take pictures of the scene from their phone and include that in the form, so then it'll also go to the the various receivers of that information, so that they could not just get confirmation, but also get the additional context and even visuals around that.
That is correct. Thanks for reminding, Yusuf. So the notification, it records not only just the information of their response, but also their location, and it's supposed to send out a Bing map over here. And again, I didn't get a chance to set up those components completely for this demo, so that's why we're missing those pieces here. But technically, you'll see a map here showing their location, and it'll also let users take a picture of their surroundings, and kind of post it here as well, so you can also see the photographs right from this planner conversation. So that's again, that's pretty powerful for someone who wants to kind of manage and monitor the safety of their employees.
But just don't think emergency. Again, with something like field workers, taking care of maintenance of machines and various facilities, also a very great use case for a non-emergency use.
That is true. And again, that data can be stored, in multiple data sources, whether it's SharePoint list or backend database, and then that data could be used for reporting or AI-related work. In addition to the crisis management app, in addition to sending out this notification, it would also go ahead and create planner tasks for their internal crisis management teams, specific management teams, and basically we'll create tasks for them to take care of certain protocol-based tasks for a specific crisis. And on the back end of it, just to give you an overview or kind of a little bit of detail on the back end, these two Power Apps, the applications use a couple of workflows, and as I mentioned, this will probably help you kind of understand the capabilities of Flow as well. So, and this is the flow that really sends out the notification, and it creates the tasks in the planner, and it sends out a notification alert in the Teams channel as well. As you can see, we're using multiple connectors here. We're using the PowerApps connector, and the Outlook connector, the Planner connector, SharePoint, and also a webhook, the HTTP post connector. This is the connector that I had mentioned for scenarios where you just want to call a REST-based service. You could simply use this.
Hey,
Again,
Ratna, quick question. It looks like there's something in the chat box. If users are on Wi-Fi, does it still send their location? Looks like this person might have had some issues in the past with Wi-Fi connectivity and GPS tracking.
yeah, so this particular application is I am not quite sure if this is where set for offline connectivity, but yeah, we can definitely implement the logic in place to have consider those offline scenarios where temporarily the users have lost their Wi-Fi or maybe their connectivity is lost. That information can be pushed and then into a message box, and then that information we can handle that.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, feel free to throw out any follow-up there.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
and
Ratna.
yeah, and we have Grant in our audience. Grant, I'm not sure if you're there. Yeah, and he was the one who created this app. And Grant, chime in when you get a chance.
Hi, yes, I am here. Thanks for including me. Was there a specific question?
Yeah, it was if users are on Wi-Fi, does it still send their location? It seems like there's been issues with that in the past.
Yes. In all of the testing that I've done, the Wi-Fi works and is able to get you the lat long GPS coordinates just like you could on LTE.
Awesome.
Thanks, Grant.
Sure.
So again, this is the workflow that for the manager app, and we have the workflow for the response from the user. Again, as you can see, this flow can gathers information about the user location, the photo that users have uploaded, and Bing Maps location, and their response, whether it's they're safe or not, and then it kind of sends out an email to the group or to the manager, and also to a notification to the Teams channel through the webhook. Again, this is similar to the one that we saw in the manager workflow. So as you can see, the combination of PowerApps and Flow is is pretty powerful. Primarily, you may not need any business logic in your PowerApps application itself, at least complex logic. Everything can be moved into, most of it could be moved into Flow or maybe into a web service or through another connector or database. So that will make the PowerApps application pretty lightweight, and considering the performance best practices. So that's the wrap up of the demo real quick. And going back to our slides. So this slide really kind of highlights the best practices of PowerApps and Flow governance. Essentially, we're talking about three things, right? How do you secure your data and your network? How do you monitor your apps? When you have hundreds or thousands of apps, whether it's PowerApps or Flow, how do you manage those and monitor those? Excuse me. And how do you set up alerts, admin level alerts, and automate stuff through actions, right? So for these purposes, Microsoft has provided certain tools, and again, so for securing data network, you could use your regular network policies will be honored by PowerApps. If a specific website is blocked on your network, and PowerApps is trying to connect to that service, it will fail basically. So it kind of honors that. And data policies So there are the things called data loss prevention policies that you can set up, and that will let you manage which apps the users can use and cannot use. So sort of whitelisting the apps for business purposes and non-business purposes. And specific environments. So PowerApps has the ability to create creating additional environments based on your use case. So for example, you can have production environment, which will be maybe the live one, and then you can have separate environments for staging, test, dev. And then, so those are the security level features that are available. There's also a location-based conditional access policy that you can set up in AD for these two apps, in addition to other apps available in Office 365. So, and then how do you monitor these? So the audit logs capture pretty much all the events and responses from a flow-based workflow, and Microsoft is working on capturing those events, similar events from Power Apps as well. Again, the details about that are available in the link over here. This is a Ignite session from last year, so it's pretty useful, pretty informative. Along with, there is a white paper about Power Apps admin level features that you could use to set up governance policies, automations. In addition to the audit trail, there is a feature that lets you download a report of all the licenses that your users have. Because Power Apps have different levels of licenses. Power Apps license that comes with Office 365 Enterprise licenses, or Power Apps Plan 1 and Plan 2. And these licenses they also Microsoft provides trial licenses for these. And users can tend to kind of start using those trial licenses, and quickly the list of licenses can grow exponentially. So you may want to keep a tab on that using that report. And then the admin analytics screen, Microsoft has released this new admin analytics screen. And there's also a Power Platform admin screen as well, which is a little bit different from individual Power Apps and Flow admin screens. They capture a lot of information out of the box, and they'll give you a lot of analytics using Power BI reports primarily. And setting up alerts, again, these can be done using specific admin-based Flow and Power Apps connectors. Again, the details are available in the full slide deck, and you can automate most of your processes using PowerShell that's specific for Power Apps and Flow, admin-related functionality, and also the admin management connectors. So these are like 10 high-level options that you have to kind of manage Power Apps and Flow apps, and also set up certain governance practices. And talk about Power Apps licensing. So again, this is a quick snapshot of Power Apps licensing. And the out-of-the-box Power Apps that comes with Office 365, it lets you create Canvas-based apps and lets you connect to most connectors out there, except for premium connectors. For premium connectors, you will require Plan 1 or Plan 2. And then to connect to a CDS database and create a complex logic there using the data models, you will need Plan 1. And again, specific to Plan 2, the model-driven apps do require Plan 2. And premium connectors, again, as I mentioned, they're available in Plan 1 and Plan 2 as well. One of the things to note again is for basic Power Apps license that comes with Office 365, I should say actually for Canvas-based apps, which primarily require just the Plan 0, what we call it, and the users can, the consumers of the apps may or may not require the full license of Power Apps. There's a specific license called Enterprise F1 license that could be used sort of like a kiosk license. However, for any apps that are built with features that will require Plan 1 or Plan 2 license, the consumers will also require Plan 1 and Plan 2 licenses. That's something to keep in mind. Again, just to summarize, all plans can create canvas-based apps and use standard connectors. Plan 1 and Plan 2 are required for premium connectors. Plan 1 or Plan 2 are required for CDS, and Plan 2 is required to create and manage CDSs instances through different environments. The Plan 2 also lets you kind of create, as I mentioned, separate environments and manage the environments, and that will let you create CDS instances which have a one-to-one mapping.
Hey, Ratna, real quick, just from a more business-minded perspective, could you maybe give an example, even going back to the crisis app, of what that would look like in terms of sort of the day-to-day if you were to do a Plan 1 versus Plan 2 approach, if that's at all applicable?
Sure, definitely. So, for example, the crisis app, although very powerful, its nature is pretty simplistic, right? So for that, Canvas-based apps should be more than enough. But there may be instances where you may want to integrate that information with other, services on-prem or online. For that, you may require model-driven apps. But if you want to store that information, for example, in SharePoint lists or SQL databases, whether it's in Azure or on-prem, the basic SQL connectors should suffice. But if you want to use one of the premium connectors, or premium data sources such as Oracle, for that, if you want to store that information in Oracle, you will require Plan 1 or Plan 2 licenses. So that's, I would say, just to give you an example of the business scenarios that will require Plan 1 and Plan 2. And again, primarily, the CDS databases let you create your own database model in the cloud. So you will not need to manage a separate database instance. But again, for that, you will require Plan 1 or Plan 2. Microsoft Flow again is included in all plans. Depending on the plan, if you have PowerApps Plan 1, you get Flow Plan 1 as well, and so on and so forth. And then PowerApps Plan 2, as I mentioned, is required for creating business process flows specific to the model-driven apps. And flow licensing, again, this is pretty straightforward. I didn't create a snapshot of the flow licensing, but essentially, I'll probably just bring it up. Yeah, so this is a Microsoft licensing page for Flow. As you can see, there are this page right here is pretty informative and pretty clear. And I have a slide deck that has a summary of these. But if you want to check the pricing, it's available here. Again, but the summary of that again is all plans of Flow allow you to create unlimited automated workflows, either using templates or from scratch, and they're all ready for mobile use. They work in iOS or and Android. But business process flows, again, as we talked about, they require the Flow Plan 2. And premium connectors, as I mentioned, they're again for Flow as well. They will require Plan 1 and Plan 2. And connectivity to on-prem data using on-prem data gateway, again, is only available in Plan 1 or Plan 2. The other important thing is only Plan 1 and Plan 2 allow inviting others to share ownership and run workflows on flows, basically. So, but if you want to simply publish your app, it should suffice. The basic one should suffice.
And Ratna, here's just a question that I thought might be on some of the folks' minds here is, if dealing with, say, external users, contractors, that sort of thing, how does PowerApps and Flow work in terms of, building them into the system and the process?
Yeah, so that's the key. That's what I mentioned about the kiosk licenses. Again, for an app and Flow that is built on the basic PowerApps /Flow license that comes with Office 365, they, users or external users or client users who need to consume those apps or flow based apps can be given this special license called F1, which is much less in cost compared to the other additional licenses. But they will require that F1 license, which is sort of a kiosk license, to let them consume the apps. But again, for any apps that are built that will require Plan 1 and Plan 2, even the external clients or external users will require that Plan 1 or Plan 2 license. And again, that's a little bit of a discussion how we manage those accounts, whether it is separate AD instance or as a cloud-only users, right? So that's a different discussion. But yeah, they will require those licenses as well.
Cool. Thank you for that.
Sure. So again, we did receive a lot of questions from users, from audience members who have signed up for this webinar. And out of those, we've kind of identified 4 top questions. We already talked about the first 2, best practices on governance guidelines and licensing options. One question that was asked was about PowerApps integration. Again, PowerApps can be integrated with in general with third-party services through connectors. And as I mentioned, there are about 300 or 200 plus connectors available out there. Again, some of them obviously may be premium connectors. Aside from that, you can embed Power Apps-based apps, for example, in SharePoint Online, as I mentioned, within modern site pages. Or you could simply get the URL to the app based on the app ID and embed that in an iframe, for example, in a website. And Power BI also connects to Power Apps, so you can embed a Power Apps report, Power Apps application within a Power BI report. Again, to the most purposes, anything outside of these or other Microsoft Office 365 services, you could simply use the URL to the app based on the app ID and then embed it into, say, a web page as an iframe. Differences between flow and workflows. Again, the main difference between flow and workflows is that for workflows, again, SharePoint workflows work primarily with SharePoint data, backend custom lists and document libraries and other components. But they do also allow you to connect to third-party services, but only through the web service call action. Right, as you are aware of in SharePoint 2013 workflows. But Flow makes all that very easy, and you can connect to pretty much any third-party service that are available based on the connectors, and it's very easy to use and easy to set up. So I would say that's probably the primary difference among others, but that's really, yeah. And I did add a lot of references here that may be useful for some of you folks especially for IT admins, IT managers. You could use the link over there that talks about best practices and governance. That's the Ignite session video and slide deck. And we have other useful links about Power Apps and Flow licensing, and also the integration capabilities that I just mentioned. How do you embed apps in different systems, and the differences between Microsoft Flow and SharePoint Designer-based workflow is explained in detail in this link. So yeah, that kind of concludes our webinar today. I know we kind of wrapped up early, but any questions or comments from the audience?
Yes, please throw those out. We're officially here until 11:15, so hopefully we got all of your questions answered, but definitely want to pass the mic to the attendees here to get anything else answered. So please feel free to chime in. Same goes for our Microsoft friends. If you have any questions, comments, add-ons to previously discussed items, would love to get those as well.
All right. So yeah, I mean, yeah. Again, we will send out this slide deck to all of you folks out there, and you can reach out to me or Yosef at any time, and we can probably answer your questions offline.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this is the recorded session, so we'll go ahead and send this out sometime either later today or tomorrow. And obviously, feel free in that email to respond back with any questions you might have, and we'd be more than happy to have any follow-up discussions with you and the larger team at your organization if you'd like to organize something. So, other than that, if there are no further questions, again, really do appreciate the time from everyone, the cooperation, and work to help get the word out from Microsoft, and just really appreciative of everyone's time and effort here. So thanks again for joining.
Yes, thank you all.